What's going on, everybody? Today we are jumping into a topic that we got a bunch of questions on through our Juji Mufu and Dave deadlift video, through our programming deep dive podcast. What we're going to be looking at today is the difference between a deficit deadlift and a block pull or an elevated deadlift. When you use them, how to set up for them, kind of just breaking them down in the simplest terms so you guys can take away the information that you need to make your training better. Okay, so first and foremost, we're gonna jump into a deficit deadlift. As you saw in that Juji Mufu video, Dave kind of discovered that Juji needed to get more quad out of his pull, right? He needed to get more quad activation or quad utilization in his deadlift. So what he did, he raised him up off the floor and forced him to pull from a deficit. What we're gonna be doing today is kind of breaking that down a little bit further. So the purpose of a deficit deadlift is to increase the range of motion and to start getting more quad into the movement itself. So Alex, we're going to demonstrate here. When you are first starting out with a deficit deadlift, what you don't want to do is jack up that height any more than you have to, right? So if you can look here, we only have about 2 mats there. So what is that? About inch and a half? Yeah. Beautiful. About an 1.5 inch deficit. That's kind of where I would start. As you saw with that video as well, Juji worked his way up. When you were just starting out, start with a slight deficit, see how it feels, and work from there. I wouldn't go any more than 3 inches, 4 inches, depends on your height, depends on your leverages. Alex here has arms and limbs like a spider monkey, so he may be able to get slightly larger deficit. But, so let's kind of break this down. Alex, let's just show them how to do it. Good, let's see it. Not too bad. So, first and foremost, you can put the bar down. When you are setting up for a deficit deadlift, you need to realize that you are not going to be able to pull from your normal height with your hips. You need to bring your hips down a little bit farther. And what that's going to do, that's going to allow those quads to start getting more involved in the movement. So,
normally I'd be like here.
Yep, so go do your normal setup, just like you were going to pull normally. As you see, his hips are a little bit higher. Your hips are probably a little bit higher than that. Yeah, so you're about right there normally. But now with a deficit, we're gonna drop those hips just a little bit to get more out of those quads. As you can see, we're gonna actually bring those knees back just right there. That's perfect. You feel that load into the quads, perfect, rest. Or do a rep, that's cool too. It's fucking great, I don't care. Good. So let's do that again, just a little bit slower. First and foremost, you're going to notice that the position of your feet shouldn't necessarily change, right? This is going to be a little bit different when we start talking about block pulls, but the bar is going to start the same distance away it would normally, all right? From this position, what you want to do is I always have my athlete go down and reach the bar without bending the legs. It's going to look a little crazy and a little funky, and he's going to be rounded here, but that's okay, because what I want him to focus in on is driving those shins to the bar, lowering the hips, straightening that back out. Good, pull straight up. Squeeze, perfect, awesome. Rest. Very basic, very straightforward. The idea should be that you are feeling those quads more, right? So if you're performing deficit deadlift and you're just feeling it in your lower back, you may need to increase that height just a little bit. But every time you increase that height, those hips are gonna have to drop down to compensate a little bit more. What you don't wanna do is just do a deficit cut. No, what you don't wanna do is have a deficit stiff leg, because you're disadvantaging yourself from so many different angles that you're more than likely gonna get all sorts of jacked up. So let's demonstrate what that looks like. If you kept your hips exactly where they are with the normal deadlift, there we go, up, mostly back. Yeah, not so much in the quads, not so much in the... It turns into a stiff leg, it looks a little funky, not what we want to do, right? So, very basic, focusing in on the correct height. Again, if that height, you're not feeling in the quads and you're just feeling in your lower back, try dropping those hips a little bit more. And if you're in a position where you are just stiff legging the weight up, maybe deficits aren't right for you at this moment in time. Another consideration when you're talking about deficits is your ability to even get into that position. So if he was all jacked up and tight and he could not physically get down into that position without compromising, and we'll show it from the side, compromising that lower back. So for example, show him a good lower back. Good, right? Nice and tight, nice and neutral. But if he couldn't do that because, because it looks like he's twerking. No, but what we really want to focus in on is here. If you are compromising your position based on your inability to get into a good position to pull, this may not be a good movement for you right away. I would focus in on performing other quad dominant exercises to build up the quads. This may not be your go-to move. If you have to sacrifice position and form for the movement, total waste of time, and you're just going down the wrong road. The goal with a supplemental lift like this or a secondary lift like this is you want to start challenging positions where you are weak that will help build up your main move, which is your deadlift. If you are weak from the floor, this is a fantastic way to start training your ability to break the floor with that deadlift better and better while maintaining a position, a stable and strong position with a neutral spine in greater degrees of hip and knee flexion. Sounds complicated, it's not. The farther down you go, the more stable you need to be here while being able to maintain a strong and stable and neutral spine. So let's jump into the block pull. All right, guys, now that we've gone over the deficit deadlift, let's go over the block pull, how to utilize it, how to get it into your training, and how to do it correctly. All right, Alex here. We have set up our bar with our DC blocks. DC blocks are a fantastic way to be able to elevate bars, and they're super lightweight. Found at elitefts.com. All right, promo over. Let's jump right into the block pull. So why would you do a block pull? And how are they different than rack pulls? Block pulls I like better because they're more sport specific for the deadlift itself. If you think about it this way, if you're pulling out of a rack, the tension in the bar is going to remain the same. You're not ever pulling the slack out of the bar. It's going to be stiff the whole time. If you're pulling off of a block, it's more closely related to what you're going to be doing on the platform itself. You have to pull the slack out of the bar and then pull up. Very simple. So you can rest. So the reasoning behind this and the reasoning behind elevating the bar is to work on a particular weak point that you may suffer from during your deadlift. For example, locking out deadlifts for some people is the hardest part of the movement. This is a fantastic way to work on that spot. Maybe it's halfway up your shin, maybe it's just under your knee, where your weakness is specifically. And this is going to be one of the biggest take-home messages for either the deficit or the block pull. You need to figure out where you need to train it. Not just because someone else that you see on the internet or in a video is doing it a certain way, doesn't mean you have to do it the exact same way. So these DC blocks, those are again about like 1.5 inches, 2 inches, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere there.
Yeah, so and again, just like we did with the deficit, we're going to start with a slight block or a slight elevation. Because for example, for someone like Alex, I've seen him deadlift, and this is, if he's gonna slow down, he's probably gonna slow down just about right here. So the idea is you wanna match up the spot in which you fail, or the spot in which you are most likely to fail your deadlift, with the appropriate height for your block pull. But one thing that you need to realize is that you're not going to be able to get the same amount of leg drive into a block pull because it's going to be taking a lot of the leg out of the movement, focusing more on the stability of that back as well as the glutes. I see him almost grab his ass. That was weird. I was like, yeah, all right. Continue. So when we're talking about the block pull specifically, we're focusing in on your ability to maintain a stable back, posterior chain, right? As well as your ability to drive the hips forward. So you're going to get a lot out of making sure that you're driving your glutes and you're finishing the deadlift, which for a lot of people is the hardest part. So when you set up, the lower to the ground you are, the smaller your block, the more closely related to a normal deadlift stance you will be. As you get higher and higher, you need to actually get a little bit closer to the bar, just like you would in a regular deadlift, right? So you can start with the bar out in front of you, but if you're coming up, if you're working just under your knees, you have to put it in that same sport-specific spot that you would with a normal deadlift, all right? So let's show a few reps here. As you can see, starting position, good. Squeezing the hips through, perfect. Do a couple more reps. Squeeze, perfect. Squeeze, Perfect. Alex is looking really, really good. So again, if we were going to want to work on his ability to finish the rep, to finish that lockout, maybe he wants to work just under the knees. What we're gonna do, we're just gonna add another block. So that may be a little bit lower, that's all right. It doesn't necessarily have to be exact, right? If you wanna get more exact, that's fine. This is about halfway up his shin. This is where a lot of people probably find that they're having a lot of issues or trouble. So now that we're a little bit higher, Alex is actually gonna start a little bit closer to the bar. So what I want him to do, yep, perfect, set up normally. Good, right there. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus in on stabilizing everything nice and tight, because as we get up, we're gonna get less leg drive, and this is gonna be more hips and glutes and maintaining that stability in that upper back. So let's see it. So you have to lock in, really get nice and tight, and then you're just thinking hips through. Hips, good, perfect. Do it again, same thing. Hips, right through. Good, perfect. As you can see, we're reducing the range of motion. And when we're reducing the range of motion, we are adjusting at what you really need to focus in on at that particular time. So from about halfway from the shin and up, and even a little bit lower, it's less about leg drive and more about getting those glutes to fire and hips going through and finishing the movement. So if you are struggling with your lockout, give this a shot, and this is gonna be a great tool that you can potentially utilize to get your deadlift to finally start moving again. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Whether you're gonna be using a block pull, whether you're gonna be using a deficit deadlift in your training, make sure that you are doing it for the right purpose, and you are doing it because it's going to improve your training specifically. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing. Don't ego lift, don't put too much weight on the bar to jack yourself up. Do this smart and you'll be strong for many, many years. Thank you guys for checking this out, and I will see you in the next one.